The year 2026 is widely regarded as a pivotal milestone in humanity's ambition to explore space, as SpaceX aims to launch the first uncrewed Starship missions to Mars. If these test flights proceed as planned and successfully demonstrate the safety and reliability of the technology, the first crewed mission to the Red Planet could take place as early as 2028. Such an achievement would mark a historic turning point, representing the first time humans have the opportunity to live on more than one planet instead of relying solely on Earth. The ultimate goal extends far beyond a handful of short-term exploration missions. Once the initial flights prove successful, launch frequency is expected to increase steadily, transporting equipment, supplies, and settlers to establish a self-sustaining colony. According to SpaceX's long-term vision, this settlement could evolve into a thriving city within roughly 2 decades, capable of producing its own food, energy, and essential resources without requiring constant support from Earth. To make this vision a reality, the first major challenge is transporting enormous amounts of cargo and people beyond Earth's gravitational pull as affordably as possible. Most of a rocket's fuel is not consumed while traveling through space, but rather during the initial ascent, when it must overcome Earth's powerful gravity. Once a spacecraft reaches orbit, the near-vacuum environment offers almost no atmospheric resistance, allowing it to maintain its trajectory with relatively little additional energy. As long as it achieves the proper speed and flight path, the spacecraft can continue along its calculated orbit until it reaches its destination. One proposal suggested refueling on the Moon before heading to Mars. However, engineering analyses indicate that this approach offers little benefit. The fuel required to land on the lunar surface and launch back into space would nearly cancel out the advantages gained from refueling there. As a result, the more practical solution is considered to be orbital refueling around Earth. Under this plan, a Starship launches from Earth using nearly all of its onboard propellant to reach low Earth orbit. Another Starship, configured as a tanker, then rendezvouses and docks with it in orbit, transferring hundreds of tons of fuel. Once the tanks are fully replenished, the spacecraft can begin its journey to Mars without having to carry the entire fuel load during liftoff. Launches, however, cannot occur at just any time of the year. Earth and Mars orbit the Sun at different speeds. Earth completes one orbit in approximately 365 days, while Mars requires nearly 687 days. Because of this difference, the two planets align in their most favorable positions only about once every 26 months, creating the most fuel-efficient launch opportunity. These launch windows are critically important because missing one means waiting more than 2 years for the next favorable alignment. If these optimal windows are fully utilized, uncrewed demonstration missions are expected to fly first, followed by crewed expeditions. Travel time depends on several factors, including acceleration, deceleration, and orbital trajectory, but with current technology, each journey is expected to take about 6 months. Such a lengthy voyage presents significant challenges related to astronaut health, mental well-being, and mission logistics. Because the amount of cargo required is enormous, SpaceX does not intend to send only a single spacecraft during each launch window. Instead, multiple Starships are expected to depart together, carrying construction equipment, industrial machinery, supplies, and flight crews. Having several spacecraft arrive simultaneously also improves mission resilience, since the remaining VEHICLES can continue supporting the mission if one experiences a failure. Transportation costs remain the key factor determining whether this entire vision is achievable. During NASA's Space Shuttle era, launching 1 kilogram of cargo into space costs well over $75,000. Subsequent technological improvements reduced costs only modestly. The true breakthrough came when SpaceX embraced reusable rocket technology. Over little more than a decade, launch costs have reportedly fallen dramatically from roughly $12,000 per kilogram to approximately $200 per kilogram, making access to space hundreds of times less expensive than during the Space Shuttle program. Even so, building a genuine civilization on Mars remains an immense undertaking. Experts estimate that at least 1 million metric tons of equipment, construction materials, industrial machinery, power systems, and essential supplies must be transported before the colony can become largely self-sufficient without depending entirely on continuous resupply missions from Earth. Even at today's launch prices, the total cost could still exceed $1 trillion, an investment large enough to challenge any government or private organization. For this reason, SpaceX's long-term objective is not simply to build larger spacecraft, but to continue driving launch costs dramatically lower. If advances in full reusability can reduce transportation expenses by another thousandfold, establishing a multiplanetary civilization would become far more financially realistic, rather than requiring an enormous upfront investment. The overall cost could be spread across approximately 40 years, amounting to only several tens of billions of dollars in level of spending that the global economy could potentially sustain. Once the challenge of transporting people and cargo away from Earth is solved, another equally formidable obstacle awaits at the destination, landing safely on Mars. The Martian atmosphere is extraordinarily thin, with a density of only about 1% that of Earth's atmosphere. As a result, atmospheric drag alone is nowhere near sufficient to slow a spacecraft weighing hundreds of tons as it approaches the planet at speeds exceeding 20,000 kilometers per hour. Under these conditions, even a minor error during the final stage of descent could result in catastrophe. If the deceleration system fails to perform exactly as intended, the spacecraft would strike the Martian surface at tremendous speed, instantly becoming one of the most expensive piles of debris ever created. To overcome this challenge, SpaceX has developed a unique landing technique known as the belly flop maneuver. Instead of descending vertically like a traditional rocket, Starship rotates into a horizontal orientation as it enters the Martian atmosphere. The vehicle's broad body acts as a massive aerodynamic brake, maximizing drag despite the planet's extremely thin atmosphere. Once its velocity has been reduced to a safe level, the spacecraft rotates back into a vertical position and ignites its engines during the final moments before touchdown to perform a controlled soft landing. This innovative maneuver is considered one of the most critical technologies, determining whether humanity's dream of building its first city on Mars can ultimately become a reality. As Starship approaches the Martian surface, it will perform one of the most critical maneuvers of the mission, transitioning from a horizontal flight orientation to a vertical landing position just before touchdown. Its engines will then ignite to slow the spacecraft and precisely control its descents, allowing it to land safely on the red planet. Once the challenge of landing has been solved, the next major obstacle is selecting the site for humanity's first permanent base. This is no simple task. Mars is covered with enormous impact craters, jagged rock fields, and countless steep slopes that could endanger both spacecraft and future infrastructure. The goal is not merely to find a flat area suitable for landing, but to identify a location that is safe enough to support long-term human habitation and the future expansion of a settlement. To determine the most suitable location, scientists have established three primary criteria. The first is access to essential resources, especially water. Unlike Earth, Mars has no rivers, lakes, or oceans. Instead, most of its water exists as underground ice deposits or is concentrated within the polar ice caps. These ice layers are buried beneath dust and rock, which act as natural insulation and have allowed them to remain preserved for millions of years. Despite the planet's harsh climate. For future explorers, accessing this underground ice will be vital. Water is not only necessary for drinking and everyday use, but it can also be split through electrolysis to produce oxygen for breathing and hydrogen for manufacturing rocket fuel. However, extracting these resources is practical only if the ice is relatively close to the surface. Current research suggests that the ideal location would contain ice no deeper than about 5 meters below the ground, making excavation and resource extraction far more efficient. The second criterion involves climate conditions and the availability of solar energy. Although Mars remains extremely cold throughout the year, regions located relatively close to the equator, generally below about 40 degrees latitude, receive significantly more sunlight than the polar regions. This provides two major advantages. Solar panels can generate considerably more electricity, and temperatures are somewhat less severe, typically averaging around minus 60 degrees Celsius rather than dropping far lower as they do in other parts of the planet. These conditions make it much easier to maintain habitable environments and operate critical equipment. Scientists must also consider Mars' enormous dust storms. These storms can last for weeks or even months, blocking sunlight and dramatically reducing the power generated by solar energy systems. As a result, the ideal settlement site must combine abundant sunlight with a relatively low frequency of dust storms to ensure a stable and reliable energy supply for the entire base. The third major criterion is geological stability. Vast, flat plains are strongly preferred because they provide safer landing conditions for spacecraft, while minimizing the risks of landslides and accidents caused by rough terrain. Areas containing numerous young volcanic features or signs of recent geological activity are generally excluded to reduce long-term hazards to the colony. Another important consideration is elevation. Regions located approximately 3 to 4 kilometers below Mars reference elevation are regarded as especially favorable. At these lower elevations, the atmosphere is slightly denser than it is in the highlands, allowing spacecraft to slow down more effectively during landing. The thicker atmosphere also helps moderate temperature fluctuations and improves the efficiency of capturing carbon dioxide, a key raw material for producing oxygen and rocket fuel for return missions to Earth. When all of these criteria are considered together, one region stands out as the leading candidate for humanity's first settlement on Mars. On topographic maps of the red planet, where red represents higher elevations and blue indicates lower-lying terrain, Arcadia Planitia consistently emerges as one of the most promising locations. Arcadia Planitia sits at an elevation of nearly -4 kilometers and lies at approximately 40 degrees latitude. It is a vast, relatively flat plain that is exceptionally well suited for repeated Starship landings. More importantly, multiple orbital observations indicate that substantial underground ice deposits exist close to the surface, making the region highly favorable for supplying future crews with water. For these reasons, Arcadia Planitia is widely regarded as one of the best locations for establishing humanity's first settlement on Mars. Once the landing site has been selected, the next challenge is deploying the entire logistical infrastructure needed to support human exploration. According to current plans, 5 uncrewed cargo starships will be launched to Mars in 2026 before any astronauts set foot on the planet. Their mission will be to verify the exact location and volume of underground ice deposits, assess potential environmental and terrain hazards, and prepare the essential conditions required for human survival. In addition to conducting scientific surveys, these spacecraft will transport critical equipment, including power generation systems, resource extraction machinery, water processing facilities, and the first life support modules. The objective is to establish part of the necessary infrastructure before the arrival of the first human crews. If every stage of preparation proceeds successfully, at least 2 crewed starships, accompanied by 2 additional cargos, are expected to depart from Mars in 2028. These missions will carry the equipment, supplies, machinery, and materials needed to begin constructing humanity's first Martian settlement. However, if the uncrewed missions uncover significant environmental or technical challenges, the first crewed missions could be postponed by approximately 2 years to ensure the highest possible level of safety. One of the most important objectives for the pioneering crews will be constructing a fuel production facility directly on Mars. Rather than transporting all of their fuel from Earth, they will make use of the planet's own natural resources. Water extracted from underground ice, combined with carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere, will be processed through chemical reactions to produce methane and liquid oxygen. These 2 substances are the primary propellants used by Starship, enabling the spacecraft to refuel on Mars and paving the way, not only for return journeys to Earth, but also for even more ambitious missions deeper into the solar system. Before humanity can even think about building a true city on Mars, it will first need to establish a pioneering outpost that serves as the launching point for the entire colonization effort. This initial base will welcome the first exploration crew, test life support technologies, and prepare all the essential infrastructure needed for a permanent settlement to grow. The ultimate goal is to transform this small outpost into a self-sustaining city capable of operating independently and meeting most of its essential needs without relying heavily on Earth. So, what might a future Martian city actually look like? According to SpaceX's vision, its development would unfold in 4 successive stages. The first stage would consist of a small outpost with only a limited number of residents, primarily dedicated to scientific research and technology testing. As critical systems become more reliable, the base would expand into a medium-sized settlement featuring additional living quarters, laboratories, and production facilities. During the third stage, it would evolve into a true colony with thousands of inhabitants and a growing local economy. Finally, the fourth stage envisions a fully developed city capable of producing most of the resources required to support long-term human life. Turning this ambitious vision into reality requires engineers to solve numerous, complex challenges simultaneously. 8 key areas are considered essential for establishing a lasting civilization on Mars: energy production, oxygen generation, clean water, food production, radiation protection, dust control, infrastructure development, and population growth. Among these, the human element is especially important. SpaceX has previously outlined a long-term goal of transporting approximately 1 million people to Mars over the course of 2 to 3 decades. However, this process will almost certainly occur gradually rather than all at once. The earliest missions will carry highly skilled professionals, including engineers, physicians, scientists, and technicians. They will be responsible for constructing infrastructure, operating life support systems, and laying the foundation for the entire colony, given the significant risks involved. These pioneering settlers will likely receive substantial financial incentives and support from sponsoring organizations or private companies. As living conditions improve and transportation between Earth and Mars becomes more routine, ordinary citizens may also have the opportunity to relocate. The cost of the journey could be covered through personal savings, long-term employment contracts, or even specialized financing programs designed specifically for people wishing to settle on the Red Planet. However, transporting people to Mars is only the beginning. Keeping them healthy in such a completely unfamiliar environment will be the true challenge. One of the biggest concerns is that Mars has only about 38% of Earth's gravity. Living under these conditions for many years could lead to muscle loss, decreased bone density, and various cardiovascular problems. To minimize these effects, future Martian residents will likely need to follow rigorous daily exercise routines, use artificial gravity simulation systems, and receive specialized medical treatments. Beyond the physical challenges lie equally significant psychological ones. People living on Mars will be separated from their home planet by hundreds of millions of kilometers. Communication with Earth will no longer occur in real time but will involve a delay of approximately 3 to 22 minutes for each transmission, depending on the orbital positions of the two planets. Prolonged isolation, combined with the absence of forests, oceans, and familiar natural landscapes, could increase feelings of loneliness, anxiety, depression, and even social conflict within the community. For that reason, Martian settlements cannot simply consist of sterile engineering modules. They will need to be designed as comfortable living environments that include green spaces, recreational areas, entertainment facilities, cultural centers, and comprehensive mental health services to help residents maintain emotional well-being throughout many years of life on the Red Planet. Beyond these concerns, cosmic radiation remains one of the greatest threats to human survival on Mars. Unlike Earth, Mars lacks both a strong global magnetic field and a thick atmosphere capable of shielding its surface from high-energy particles originating from the Sun and deep space. On average, the Martian surface is exposed to radiation levels roughly 50 times higher than those experienced on Earth, significantly increasing the long-term risks of cancer, DNA damage, and other degenerative diseases. To address this problem, both SpaceX and NASA are actively developing new radiation protection technologies for spacecraft and habitats. Looking further into the future, scientists even hope to create artificial magnetic fields surrounding Martian bases to deflect charged particles, partially recreating the protective shield provided by Earth's magnetosphere. Alongside these advanced technologies, a much simpler, yet highly promising solution also exists. Using the layer of rock and dust covering the Martian surface, known as regolith, as a protective shield over the roofs and walls of habitats. This naturally occurring material can absorb a significant portion of incoming cosmic radiation, reducing the exposure experienced by residents, without requiring enormous quantities of shielding materials to be transported from Earth. As a result, it could greatly reduce costs while improving the long-term sustainability of Martian colonization. First and foremost, for humans to live on Mars over the long term, their habitats must be protected from the planet's harsh environment. One of the most effective solutions is to surround or cover living areas with layers of water. Since water is highly effective at absorbing and weakening many forms of harmful cosmic radiation, at the same time, Mars presents another unique challenge in the form of its fine surface dust, known as regolith. These tiny, sharp-edged particles carry static electric charges, allowing them to cling easily to spacesuits, equipment, and habitat surfaces. Over time, the abrasive dust can wear down mechanical components, shorten the lifespan of machinery, and interfere with the operation of critical systems. Not only does Martian regolith present engineering challenges, but it also contains highly toxic perchlorate compounds. If these fine dust particles enter living habitats or are inhaled over extended periods, they could pose serious health risks. For that reason, every Mars base will need advanced air filtration systems, decontamination chambers at habitat entrances, and fully sealed spacesuits to minimize the amount of dust brought indoors. Martian dust creates another major obstacle by reducing the efficiency of power generation. Although solar energy is expected to be one of the primary power sources for the first settlements, sunlight on Mars is only about 40% as intense as it is on Earth. As a result, solar arrays must cover a much larger area to produce the same amount of electricity. The situation becomes even more challenging during massive dust storms that can blanket the planet. For weeks or even months covering solar panels with dust and dramatically reducing their power output. To ensure a reliable energy supply, scientists believe that Mars cannot depend solely on solar power. Robotic arms and automated cleaning systems will need to continuously remove dust from solar panels to maintain their performance. At the same time, settlements will require additional energy sources, particularly small modular nuclear reactors capable of delivering continuous electricity regardless of weather conditions. In regions where local conditions are favorable, wind power could also be harnessed as a supplementary energy source for the colony's electrical grid. However, even with an abundant supply of electricity, humans cannot survive without oxygen. Mars' atmosphere is almost impossible to breathe because it consists primarily of carbon dioxide, while oxygen makes up only a tiny fraction of the atmosphere. This means that future settlers will have to produce their own oxygen on-site in order to sustain long-term human habitation. One of the most promising technologies is MOXIE, a device developed by NASA that was successfully tested aboard the Perseverance rover, which has been operating on Mars since 2021. MOXIE draws carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere and heats it to approximately 800 derajat Celcius 1,472 derajat Fahrenheit, separating the molecules into oxygen and carbon monoxide. The oxygen is then supplied to life support systems for human use, while the carbon monoxide can be used in additional chemical processes to produce fuel for future space missions. Water resources on Mars also play a vital role in this cycle. Once water ice is extracted, it can be processed through electrolysis, splitting O molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The oxygen supplements life support systems, while the hydrogen combines with carbon to produce methane, the fuel expected to power Starship vehicles when they launch from the Martian surface and return to space. The value of water extends far beyond oxygen production and fuel manufacturing. It is also an essential resource for drinking, personal hygiene, food production, and countless other daily activities. As a result, the subsurface ice deposits on Mars are considered invaluable natural resources. Technologies such as the Redwater system are being developed to drill beneath the surface, extract buried ice, and convert it into usable water while also supporting geological research and the search for signs of ancient life. Once a reliable water supply has been secured, the next challenge is food production. Agriculture on Mars will be vastly different from farming on Earth. The planet has no fertile soil, no rainfall, extremely low atmospheric pressure, and temperatures that frequently remain below freezing. For these reasons, fully enclosed greenhouses will become an essential part of every permanent settlement. Inside these greenhouses, crops can be cultivated using hydroponic systems, in which roots grow in nutrient-rich water, or aeroponic systems, where roots are suspended in the air and continuously misted with mineral-rich solutions. Plants may receive light from specialized LED systems or from filtered and carefully regulated sunlight that has been adjusted to provide optimal conditions for photosynthesis. Looking even further into the future, scientists hope to transform Martian regolith through chemical and biological treatments that remove toxic compounds, enrich the soil with organic matter, and make it capable of supporting plant growth. If successful, these methods would significantly reduce the colony's dependence on supplies shipped from Earth and move future settlements much closer to complete self-sufficiency. Beyond supplying fresh food, agricultural systems will also become an integral part of a closed-loop ecosystem. Plants absorb the carbon dioxide exhaled by humans, generate additional oxygen, help recycle water, and contribute to maintaining healthy air quality inside living habitats. This interconnected system will be a critical component of sustaining long-term human life on Mars. Ultimately, none of these systems can function without a robust infrastructure. Before humans ever set foot on Mars, autonomous robots will be sent ahead to prepare the landing sites. They will level construction areas, excavate and relocate regolith to cover habitat modules for additional radiation shielding, and install power systems, communication networks, and many other essential facilities. The first habitat modules will be manufactured on Earth using modular designs that can either deploy automatically after landing or require only minimal human intervention before becoming operational. This approach will significantly reduce the time required to establish the first outpost while minimizing risks during the early stages of the mission. As the Martian population grows, the settlement will gradually expand into a fully developed colony with an internal transportation network, larger power plants, storage facilities for water, fuel, and food, as well as buildings dedicated to research, manufacturing, and everyday living. This infrastructure will provide the foundation for transforming the original outpost into a true city on the red planet, one capable of supporting a permanent population and continuing to expand for generations to come. The layer of loose rock and dust covering the Martian surface, known as regolith, is expected to become one of the most valuable resources for future settlements. Instead of transporting enormous quantities of construction materials from Earth at tremendous expense, settlers could use this abundant local material to manufacture compressed structural bricks or as feedstock for large-scale 3D printing systems. Advanced construction technologies would make it possible to build homes, storage facilities, roads, and many other structures directly on the Martian surface, dramatically reducing costs while accelerating the growth and expansion of the colony. In addition to physical infrastructure, a reliable communication system between Mars and Earth will be essential for the survival of any Martian settlement. The two planets are separated by an average distance of about 225 million kilometers, 140 million miles, making instantaneous radio communication impossible under average conditions. A radio signal takes approximately 12 to 13 minutes to travel from one planet to the other. However, this delay is not constant. When Earth and Mars are at their closest orbital positions, the transmission delay can drop to as little as 3 minutes. Conversely, when the two planets are on opposite sides of the Sun, signals may take more than 20 minutes to arrive. As a result, every aspect of remote operations and communication must be designed with these significant delays in mind. To address this challenge, SpaceX has proposed the concept of Marslink, a satellite network orbiting Marsat would operate on principles similar to the Starlink constellation serving Earth today. The network is expected to rely on laser-based communications, providing much faster and more reliable data transmission than traditional radio systems. During its initial deployment, Marslink could offer data speeds of around 4 megabits per second. Over the long term, however, the goal is to expand the network's capacity to exceed 1 petabit per second. If successful, Marslink would become a continuous digital bridge connecting Earth and Mars, enabling the transmission of images, scientific data, maps, experimental results, and other critical information needed to support human activities in deep space. Marslink would serve not only as the communication link between Mars and Earth, but also as the primary telecommunications network connecting settlements, vehicles, research stations, and exploration teams across the red planet. As the Martian population grows, a robust communications infrastructure will become indispensable for supporting manufacturing, healthcare, education, scientific research, and commercial activities. However, every ambitious vision raises an important question. Who will pay for such a massive undertaking? And what will humanity gain in return? During the early stages, most of the funding will likely come from space agencies such as NASA and the European Space Agency, motivated by the scientific discoveries, strategic advantages, and technological breakthroughs the program promises to deliver. At the same time, private companies like SpaceX will continue working to reduce costs by reusing rockets, mass-producing spacecraft, and attracting investment from around the world. One of the first industries expected to generate meaningful revenue is space tourism. Initially, commercial trips may focus on destinations in Earth orbit or around the Moon before eventually expanding to multi-month journeys to Mars. The opportunity to set foot on another world will undoubtedly appeal to adventurous travelers. If people today are willing to spend enormous sums to visit remote destinations such as Antarctica, the chance to live on Mars for several days or even weeks would be an experience unlike anything else on Earth. Some projections suggest that if future ticket prices fall to around 30,000 euros per passenger and approximately 50,000 people travel each year, annual revenue could approach 1,5 euro billion. While that amount would not be enough to finance humanity's entire space exploration program, it could become a significant source of income during the early years and help accelerate the growth of the off-tourism industry. Looking further ahead, the Moon, Mars, and even the asteroid belt could become strategic centers for resource extraction. Many celestial bodies are believed to contain valuable materials such as helium, platinum, rhodium, and ruthenium elements that are highly sought after for advanced electronics, clean energy technologies, aerospace engineering, and other cutting-edge industries. Nevertheless, commercial mining of these resources remains a long-term objective because current technologies are not yet mature enough, and the cost of transporting materials back to Earth remains extremely high. Beyond large-scale industries, human settlement on Mars could also create entirely new markets. Items that may seem ordinary such as Martian rocks, soil samples, souvenirs, time capsules, or even off-world memorial services for storing cremated remains could become products with immense emotional and symbolic value. As Martian communities become more stable and land use rights, residential properties, and commercial spaces may eventually be bought and sold, laying the foundation for an interplanetary real estate market over the coming decades. Even more important than economic returns is the impact this effort could have on technological progress. History has repeatedly shown that periods of intense competition and extraordinary challenges often produce remarkable scientific and engineering breakthroughs. Building a permanent settlement on Mars could spark a similar wave of innovation, leading to advances in water and air recycling systems, closed-loop agriculture, clean energy, autonomous robotics, and artificial intelligence. Even if the vision of a fully self-sustaining Martian city takes much longer to achieve, the technologies developed to keep humans alive on Mars could ultimately benefit life on Earth by helping address climate change, freshwater shortages, environmental pollution, and the depletion of natural resources. Ultimately, the most compelling reason to explore and colonize Mars is neither financial gain nor scientific achievement. It is the long-term survival of human civilization itself. As long as humanity exists on only one planet, our species will remain vulnerable to global catastrophes such as nuclear war, worldwide pandemics, asteroid impacts, or extreme climate events. Establishing permanent communities beyond Earth would transform humanity into a true multiplanetary civilization, greatly reducing the risk of extinction while providing a crucial backup for the future. In the event of a worst-case scenario such as World War III or another civilization-threatening disaster, a thriving human presence on Mars could become the key to ensuring that our civilization endures and continues to grow. If you enjoyed this video and found these insights both interesting and informative, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future content. We'd also love to hear your thoughts, questions, or opinions in the comments below. Every perspective helps create more meaningful discussions. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.